Listeners, have you wondered what to do when the mystical shows up on the page, especially when it refuses to leave? If so, you're not alone. Many writers find themselves wrestling with experiences that fall outside linear time, logic, or the way stories are supposed to unfold. In this final Ask Me Anything episode of 2025, I sit down with my student, Linda McKittrick, to talk about how to weave the spiritual, the uncanny, and the beyond belief into memoir with clarity, groundedness, and literary intention. From magical realism to lyric memoir, we explore the craft choices that honor your truth while guiding your readers. Let's dive in. Welcome to Writing Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. Well, hello. Welcome to the Writing and Resilience podcast, Linda. I am so excited to have you here, both because I love you and also because this is the last Ask Me Anything episode of 2025. And it will also be my 98th episode of the podcast. Can you believe it?
No, love that. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. So I'm excited and delighted that you get to be part of this. And as always, I like to give my guests the first chance to tell us about themselves. So, what would you like us to know about you?
I am young in my writing life, and I've benefited incredibly from working with you. I am someone who loves nature, spends most of my days outside. I love gardening and ranching and seed saving. Yeah, anything to do with the elements.
And earlier this year, you had some baby goats.
Yes, I did.
What stage would you say your goats are?
They are about 8.5, 9 months old and adorable, already showing interest in being mothers.
Oh, well then. So I was going to
Right.
ask if they were teenage goats, but it sounds like they're young adult goats at this point.
They're young adult goats. Yes, they are. They act like teenagers, but they're young adults. So,
Oh, frisky, frisky.
yes, yes, yes,
So
yes.
I can't wait to see what you write about when it comes to that, because I think there could be some juicy stuff there.
Mm,
But today we're going to talk about a very specific issue that is on your heart related to your writing and what you would like to add to it. So share your question with all of us.
great. So, I'm learning about memoir with you. And I find that when I'm writing, because I used to do AIDS and hospice work and a lot of death work, and in ranching, you're a lot with cycles, living and dying, there's changes in the climate. There is a unseen part to life that I experience as real, and it seems to, I don't know that I summon it, but it seems to be summoned into the writing. And I'm wondering how that works with memoir. This kind of time out of time space that does exist in life, but that isn't really that accessible in linear time or in telling a story that most humans tell a story about, like the story of the human Linda.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how to incorporate, can you, is it okay to incorporate mythical time and mystical experiences into memoir?
Such a great question. And I think it's a question that a lot of writers are going to be wrestling with as we begin to experiment more with the genre, right? And as people are having more experiences of awakening, of seeing the world in a different way. So, how do we handle that? So, first, I want to talk about the mystical in the way that I describe this to other writers when they're trying to work on things that I would say are in the spiritual, the mystical, the personal experience that is difficult to describe, and also experiences that go beyond what we want to call fact. Okay. And so I call all of those experiences beyond belief. And it's not that they are unbelievable. It's just that for a lot of people, they have not had these experiences, perhaps yet or ever. And so it's beyond their capacity sometimes to believe.
Right.
So I offer that because what we want to do with our readers is always be respectful of where they're at while also honoring our own truth. So, whenever we're talking about this mystical space, especially in memoir, we want to be really clear what that is. Some of that comes from reading, and I'm going to share some names of books, where authors are doing this really well. And the other piece is we want to talk to the skepticism, right? So if you share something that is beyond belief, you can say to your reader, I get it that you may not have had this experience, or, I hear the doubter inside you. There's different ways that you can talk about that that can create buy in with your reader because you can say, like, yeah, I hear you. I get that you have this experience that is very different from mine. So that's about your relationship with the reader. And there are lots of different ways that you can navigate your desire to write about things that are beyond belief while also addressing your reader's needs. And some of that's going to depend on who your readers are. Sometimes people don't do any of that and they're like, you know what? My reader is whoever shows up and they're either going to go on this journey or not. And you have the right to say that, but it's really up to you. What do you want for your book and what do you want your readers to get out of it? So that's a question you want to ask yourself at a variety of different points in the writing process. And then you want to think about the tools, right? So I've had these experiences. How do I write about them and incorporate them into memoir? And there's two different strategies that I'm going to talk about. And the first one is magical realism. So, magical realism is a literary device that often shows up. It can show up in science fiction, it shows up in speculative fiction, and it's where you are adding these mystical components to a real story. But we know at all times that they're separate from reality, right? They may be close to reality, but they're not. When I talk about reality, I'm talking about 3D plane reality of like the plot of what happens to us every day. Okay.
Right. Right.
So, magical realism, you'll see that in a lot of Latinx writing. So, look to Latinx or Latin writing, and you're going to see a lot of that in there. Some great examples of this in the memoir space. And the first one is not a memoir. So, I'm saying this clearly in case someone says to me, Lisa, but that's a novel. Yes. The first example is a novel, but it's a novel that does a lot of the same work as memoir, and that is Beloved by Toni Morrison.
Okay.
She includes the ghost and the spirit realm in this book. And in doing so, right, so she has this specter. There's this house that is haunted by this child, and this is part of the story. She is able to navigate the horrors of both slavery and the post slavery period really well. And so, that is a device that allows her to have some sort of political commentary on what was happening at that time and create a story that would immerse you in such a way that you would get deeply into the experience of someone you may not have inhabited otherwise. So, once again, this is a novel, but it is doing some work that is similar to memoir. Another great example is Maxine Kingston Hong's memoir, The Warrior Woman. And if you have not read that, oh my gosh, it is amazing because this is kind of a braiding of her story, her mother's story, and then Chinese myths. So there's all of this Chinese mysticism and Chinese mythical characters that come into the writing. And she's able to weave it all together to talk about who she is as a first generation immigrant in the United States, where she's the first one who's really coming here and assimilating. And her mother is still trying to bring in everything from, the old country or her original country. So that's another great example. Ocean Vuong has a beautiful memoir that he wrote about his mother, and he incorporates some of that in there, as well as some really beautiful lyricism. So that's another thing I'm going to talk about in a moment. And Anne Batchelder, who was on the podcast in her book Craving Spring, uses this mythical character Malvedo to talk about her fear. right? So she personifies her fear in this painting that follows her around. And that is a way to talk about how, your fears and these different vibrations that follow you on the journey of your life. So, those are some different examples. And listeners, if you're like, whoa, that was a lot of different stories, hold on. I will list these in the show notes. So, fear not, you will have access to them. But these are some different examples, and there are plenty of others where you will see how people are using magical realism in their writing. So that might mean that, you read some of these memoirs, but you also read novels where they're doing this. And that can give you some examples or can give you some ideas of how you might want to approach this. As I share this, what's coming to mind?
I'm thrilled. I'm not even a painter, but I feel like I have one of these painter thing with all the colors that I can now play with.
Beautiful. Here's something I'm going to say about this. And I'm also going to say this about the next part, which is talking about the lyric essay and the lyric memoir, is that once again, you want to think about who your reader is and what they can take in and how they take it in. Because the more you bring in the mystical and the more you create complexity with language, the more the reader has to do a lot of work to make meaning and to make sense of something. And that's fine. You, as the artist, get to make that decision. But the more opaque things are, the more difficult it is for readers to get what you're trying to say. And
Right,
so, as just a result, your readership is probably going to be smaller. And again, that's fine. For some
right.
people, they don't care. And that's your choice. But you just want to keep those things in mind
Thank you.
because that leads to the lyric memoir or the lyric essay. And usually, when it comes to lyric pieces that are in the memoir genre or that creative nonfiction genre, you'll have lyric essays that work together to create like a memoir in essays. That's a common way that this works. And so a lyric essay is an essay with a lot of experimentation where language plays a primary role. So there's a lot of playing with language, using metaphors. And metaphors can be a way to talk about magical realism too, right? So you can have some magical realism elements that have a metaphorical component or play a metaphorical role in your story. But you're using all of these devices of poetry in something that is prose.
Love.
So the pacing is going to feel different. The movement of the sentences will feel different. And you, as the reader, will have to work harder to make meaning, right? It's not being spoon fed to you, which is often what happens in a more traditional story. Some great examples of that are Be Here Always by Brandon Billings Noble. That's a great example. The Men We Reaped by Jessamine Ward. That's a great lyric memoir. And also Lydia Yukinovich's The Chronology of Water, which recently came out as a movie.
Right.
And there are many, many others. And I will include a link in the show notes from an Electric Lit article that has information on 10 different memoirs that are lyric memoirs. So I don't have to list them all, but you have some great selections.
Excellent.
And you can combine magical realism with the lyricism to create something really interesting. The key is going to be to read widely and to
Yes.
practice a lot. And then to have beta readers who are in your reader pool to say, what are you getting out of this?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yes, and I will need that for the grounding.
Yeah, because I think one of the traps that sometimes happens is that, and I've seen this with writers that I have worked with, that lyricism can become a shield to keep you from talking about the self. That's something that, you want to be really curious about is
Right,
why am I drawn to this form? Is it about creating a shield around myself or is it allowing me to say something about myself and about my experience that can be said in no other way?
right. Okay. Hmm. Yeah. For me, it feels freeing, but I always have an eye towards needing to share more of myself.
Yeah. And so when that's the case, we just want to be curious about what parts of ourselves are wanting to stay hidden. And I think
Right.
you can even, when it comes to magical realism, of course, there's like the spiritual and mystical elements that happen outside of us, but we can also look at the spiritual and mystical elements inside of us
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
think about how does all of that work together. And I have someone who is going to be on the podcast in 2026 who I'm super excited about is Atash Yagmanian, and she wrote My Name Means Fire. And this
Wow.
memoir, oh my gosh, I am just absolutely in love with this memoir. It is about the experience of having dissociative identity disorder and having that manifest during the Iranian Revolution. So it's the
Wow.
experiences of living in Iran during the Iranian Revolution that led to this condition, as well as things happening in the home. And she does this amazing job. So, talk about mysticism and magical realism of sharing the world that her trauma created, or these parts
Yeah.
of herself created, in order to stay safe and to fracture away from the trauma that was experienced.
Right.
So that's another amazing example that is using magical realism in a beautiful way to share something that I really haven't seen before.
Well, I will read that. That might be the first one I start with.
I'm just gonna tell you, like, I'm
Yeah.
fangirling right now. I'm so excited that I get to speak with her because her book caused me to lose so much sleep.
Oh,
That's
wow.
always a good sign when I can't go to bed because I wanna find out what's gonna happen next.
Okay, okay. That gives me goosebumps already. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, it's really well done, and what I would say is that she is talking about high trauma, but it is not a traumatic read. So there was
Right,
never any point in reading her book where I felt traumatized by it or overwhelmed. I just found her story and the way she told it so captivating that I kept wanting to turn the pages past my bedtime.
right. And did you carry it with you the next day?
Oh, yeah. I was definitely carrying it with me. I was excited to come back to it, and I don't wanna give any of it away. I wanna
Yeah.
wait for her interview, but I'm still thinking about both the world that she created and how she was able to put all of this together to tell a story that is very difficult to tell just because of what dissociative identity disorder is, and also just making it so accessible and having it be a different avenue of talking about trauma. Yeah, she just pulled it off so well.
Thank you for that. And I look forward to hearing her and seeing her soon, 2026, right? Around the
Yes,
corner.
it will be early 2026. So, listeners, if you're like, I can't wait for this episode, it's going to be here, I think, late January, early February. I'm still putting the full calendar together, but yeah, around that time, that's when you will hear it. And so explore. That would be my greatest invitation is explore, read these different books, see what people have done. Another great example of magical realism is We the Animals by Justin Torres. I absolutely love that. So I will also add that to the list. It's considered autofiction, right? So it is a novel. It is not based fully in reality, but it does draw heavily from his life. So it is autofiction. But it's another great example of that because we want to experiment and we want to be really gentle with ourselves as we do so.
Okay, great. I'm excited listening to all this because it opens up the whole writing world for me. But also, everything has light and dark, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, keeping an eye for where I can use it to avoid
Yes.
and just being aware of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and what I would say, like all aspects of the writing life, just being incredibly gentle with yourself, having just such compassion for all of you who wants to come to the page and then who doesn't want to come to the page because we all have those parts that like to be invisible.
Right. Another segue, the Queen's Path.
Yes, yes, another segue to the Queen's Path, which, listeners, if you are listening to this episode, is coming up in 2 episodes. My 100th episode is going to be with Stacey Simmons, who wrote The Queen's Path. I am so excited about that. And, the last thing I'll just say is that one of the reasons why I wrote Ditch Your Inner Critic, my masterclass that will help you shift your mindset, is because of those parts of ourselves that doubt, their ability to come forward.
Yes.
So, if anyone is wondering whether or not they have what it takes, or if you start writing and you're like, gosh, I don't know if I can put this in my book, or where I put it in my book, or how I put it in my book, that masterclass is going to teach you 4 very simple steps that you can use to work with your inner critic and teach it to be the support that you want it to be, because we all need that support, both internal and external, as we do this work.
Great. Well, and I just want to say you're an exceptional and exquisite teacher. I have learned so much. You've grounded me and expanded me, and I appreciate it incredibly much.
Well, it has been an absolute joy to work with you. And I'm excited for the day when people get to read your gorgeous writing, because I have been privileged to hear excerpts from it for a year now in our
Hard to believe.
class. It blows my mind. And there are so many pieces that you've written that stay with me.
Oh, wow.
And so I know that they're going to stay with readers too when the time is right for you to share this work with the world.
Thank you. That encourages me more. I appreciate that. So,
Well, if people would like to connect with you, if they want to talk about magical realism with you or
yeah,
mystical aspects of writing, what's the best way for them to connect?
right now would be my email, which is needleworker. I used to quilt a lot. Needleworker1, the number 1 at mac.com.
So, listeners, if you would like to connect with Linda, go to the show notes and you will find her email address. And if you have books for her to read in the areas of magical realism or lyric essay or lyric memoir or something else that might be inspiring, or you would just like to connect with her as a fellow writer, you can go to the show notes and you will find her email address there.
Lisa, thank you so much. One, it was just a joy and fun. And two, opened up the world again. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for being my student, for trusting this process, and for showing up in all the ways that you do. It is an absolute pleasure to know you and to know the heart of your writing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're helping it beat more. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Linda, please see the show notes for this episode. But before you go, I would love it if you would text the show if you're on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or leave a comment on YouTube with the answer to the following question. What's your favorite novel or memoir that uses magical realism? I'd love to hear your recommendations. And speaking of your thoughts on the podcast, I'd like to give a shout out to Wendy Kinar for your comment on my episode with Nina Lichtenstein, and Marcy Townsend 3635, Ross Becker 3934, and Rahema the writer for your thoughts on my episode on meditation. It was so wonderful to hear from all of you. And listeners, if you haven't reached out to the podcast yet, I would love to hear from you too. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you work on it, you free yourself of what no longer serves you. And as you do that, you become more of who you truly are.